Dear students, you are welcome to the lecture for this series. Among the series of lectures we have on Literature 101, Introduction to Fiction. In this series, we are going to look at elements of prose fiction. Therefore, by the end of the lecture, it is expected that you will be able to identify different elements of prose fiction. You should be able to explain each of these elements and apply the knowledge you are going to gain from learning about the elements of prose fiction to analyze any prose narrative you pick up after reading it. So, as it has been mentioned, something like that will come out in your exam. So, the knowledge you are going to have here will be of immense usefulness for you to carry out meaningful analysis of any of the text that may be given to you or you may be asked to work on in your exam. Now let's move on. The first element of prose fiction we are going to look at is plot. When we talk about plot, we are talking about the sequential arrangement of events in a narrative work. When you pick up a book, a narrative work, you see that there are many or several events in that story. These events are not just haphazardly arranged. They are arranged sequentially in a way that ideas from one event will flow to another. So that's what makes the whole work to appear as one, as a coherent text, because a text or a book or a work of narration is a combination of different events, but all these events are put together to have a complete text or a complete narrative work. So these events, the way they are arranged is what we call plot. For example, if you are to write a story about your life, you see that there have been events that have there are events that have taken place in your life that will make up the story of your life. But you will not put all these events together as one event, even though you are talking about the story of your life as a whole. You may start from when you were giving birth to, things they told you happened when you were giving birth to, maybe your naming ceremony and some other things. Then you move to when you started primary education, what you experienced during your primary school days, how you graduated from primary school, you entered secondary school, things that happened to you as a secondary school student, and how you wrote JAMB, got admission into Zamfara State University. You see that there are events that have taken place in your story. All these events, the way you arrange them to have a united whole, a united story, is what we call plot. Plot itself has its own elements, and we need to look at those elements so that we know what make up a plot. One of them, which actually is the first, is exposition. When we say exposition, we can break that word down to its verb form, which means expose. You have not read a story before. You have just been given a book to read, a text to read, a narrative work to read. You have not gone inside, you have not gone through it, you don't know what is there. So you need to be exposed to what is there. So the first aspect of the book we are going to read from the beginning of the book is going to expose you to the setting. It is when you open it, you know, okay, this story I'm reading is talking about Europe. This book I'm reading is talking about Nigeria. It's Western Nigeria. You begin to know characters there. You begin to know, maybe they mention only one character for the first time. You say, oh, this character, the name he bears will give you a general idea of on what you may eventually see or come across in this story. So the part of the plot called exposition is very, very important because it is that will establish the context and provide necessary details for you to understand the story. All other things that will happen thereafter, you will have got some knowledge, some information about them at the beginning of the story. And that's why in plot, exposition is very, very important. That's where the reader is introduced to the content of the narrative work. Maybe a novel, for instance. This what you read, the first paragraph, second paragraph, first page of the work of the story that will prepare your mind. You are more or less at the beginning empty. You don't know the direction the writer is taking you to. You've just picked up the book. You don't know what you are going to see there, whether something that will talk about anger, something that will talk about hunger, something that will talk about love, something that will talk about war. You don't know anything at all. But at the beginning, when you start reading, you begin to have some clue about what you expect to see in the story. And that aspect of this plot where you get that information is what we call exposition. Another element of plot is rising action. You have had the background, you have got some information about the story, you have been told what possibly you may experience, you have come across a particular character at the exposition level. Now, there will be a build up on the background you have already got, and that's what we call rising action. If there has been an issue at the beginning of the story, there has been a complication, there has been a trouble that requires an urgent attention, how will this trouble, challenge be conquered? What efforts will be made? Those are the things that will be going on in your mind as a reader. So how these are happening now, how these issues are being tackled, how the one issue happens after the other is what rising action is all about. So the tension will be rising, and your suspense will be sustained. If there is nothing to look up to, a problem that needs to be solved, there will be no need for the reader to continue reading. But when you have something that is prompting you, what is going to happen to this guy? What is going to happen to this girl? What is going to happen to this man? What is going to happen to this woman? How will this man survive this situation? That is what we call rising action. These are the questions that what you will be reading thereafter, after exposition, will be bringing to your mind. You will see how problems, conflicts will be coming up. New challenges are coming up. Somebody is making efforts to solve the problem. As he's making efforts, another problem is coming up, and one is looking at how this main character, the protagonist, will overcome all the challenges that are coming his way. That is what rising action is all about. The element of plot in which, particularly after exposition, issues begin to rise, tension begins to increase, and suspense is built up in the mind of the reader. That is the aspect called rising action. The one that follows is this. You see, there are two sides to the elements of plot. There is an aspect where things are rising, and there are aspects where these things are coming down. So we are still looking at the aspect, and in the center of it is the height of, in the center of the two sides, the sides where things are rising up, the sides where issues are coming down. In the center of these two is what we call climax. So if something that has been rising will come down, there must be a point where what is rising will stop, where the suspense, the conflict that are arising will get to their peak. So that is the point that is called climax. This is a place where the major character will have a turning point in his experience in his life. If the major character is a tragic character, things will have been working towards his favor before this time. But at the point of climax, things will change. That's why we say the person will move from grace to grass. Issues beyond the person's control will overwhelm the person. If people have been supporting the person before, now is the one who will be looking for those who support him. And if it is a comedy, things will change from bad to good. So if the person has been suffering many things before, at the height of it all, his condition will change. He will become someone who is enjoying who will begin to enjoy something that is good. So that's why we say the climax is the turning point or the most intense and pivotal moment in the story. It's the highest point of conflict. No matter the trouble that will take place in the story, it will not go beyond what happens at the climax, the highest point. And that is why it is said that at this point, the protagonist faces a critical decision or undergoes a significant change. Where should I go? What is the issue? What step will follow? So if the person has been enjoying something so good, at this point it is the other way around. You will begin to experience what is not so good. If the person has been experiencing what is not so good, at the height of its climax, the person will begin to experience something that is good, and nothing worse or better will happen after that time. So that's why it is established that the climax often determines the outcome of the central conflict. So whatever happens at that moment will determine how the story will end. So we have mentioned that plot has two sides. The side that is going on and will reach the climax, and the side that will begin to come down from the climax downward. So immediately after climax, what we begin to have is falling action. So the tension has got to the highest level it can get to. So I is coming down now. That's why we say is the aspect that follows the climax and shows the consequences of the protagonist's actions or decisions. Whatever has happened to him at the climax that has changed his situation, what are the consequences of the change in his situation? Or what are the benefits of the change in the situation that the protagonist has found him or herself? So it begins to resolve the conflict and ties up loose ends, leading the story towards its conclusion. So since there is nothing that will be worse than what has happened at the climax, we begin to see that the problem that has created tension will begin to begin to have some solution, begin to get solution. The major character will begin to find solution to the problem, or solution will begin to come for the problem that might have arisen from exposition rising action towards the climax. So after the falling action part, we then have what we call resolution. At this point, issues have been resolved. So we have seen the outcome of the story. What will eventually be the experience or the end of the story is already established. So it reveals how the conflicts are resolved and then provides closure for the narration. So there is nothing so much that will make reader's mind to go up any longer. Everybody sees where the thing is moving toward, and then solution is actually at hand. So at times that place, the resolution part is called denouement, which is uh, um, an aspect of resolution where there will be a brief period of reflection and explanation that follows the resolution. What possibly will the reader need to learn, the take home from the whole story? So when the story ends, what are the things that the reader is expected to take home, the feelings that will follow? That's where we have the normal. So we have looked at the elements of plot, and as I told you, it is the way we see it now. You can see the picture of how it is. It usually appears like a triangle where we have exposition at the beginning. Exposition where the issue one is introduced to what is there in the story, the background to the story, the setting of the story, the character we are going to find in the story, and how tension and suspense are built up towards the height of the whole thing, which is the climax. And after the climax, we begin to move down to falling action, and then from falling action to resolution, and, and then the normal. Even though it's written Nouement, it's not denouement, it's denouement. Denouement, it's a French word. So that will be the end of that story. And this will mark the end of the lecture for this time. I encourage you to go through it again and again for proper digestion of what the lecture contains. And after that, you go through the questions that will follow. Till we meet again, I appreciate you for listening, for the time you have spent going through the lecture. Thank you very much.